then you can shoot lasers. All right, so let's get to the reason y'all are here tonight. These two gentlemen came to us as far as Grass Valley and kind of the whole world, really, in Howard Donner's situation. You may recognize Jason Miller from YouTube, The Finer Points. He's got a podcast as well. You may also recognize Howard Donner because he's sort of like the Dos Equis guy, in my opinion, because like anytime I try to call him, his voicemail is like, "You almost reached me. I'm currently arm wrestling the Sultan of some Middle Eastern country," or he's like judging a beauty pageant in Tahiti. So without further ado, I'm going to let they'll tell you more about themselves. Please welcome Jason Miller and Howard Donner. Put that on you there.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks to everybody for having us here tonight. I'm going to go first, but really my talk is a bit of an introduction to what Howard is going to try to go into in deeper detail tonight. For those of you that don't know me, I have a YouTube channel called The Finer Points. My website is at learnthefinerpoints.com. And I'm a career CFI. I've been teaching flying for the last 24 years, I think, full-time. Primarily in the Bay Area originally, but up here in the mountains and now out of Grass Valley. One of the things that my company has put together and done over the years, we call Airplane Camp, which is an attempt to take pilots of all levels, experienced pilots, new pilots, take them out into challenging environments like the Sierra Nevada mountains and teach them not just how to operate the aircraft that they fly there, but more importantly, how to contingency plan and deal with whatever might come up. If you have an engine failure, you go down in a field, how do you really get rescued? You know, how are you not the person that survives the accident but never makes it home? And Howard has been a huge part of that education. We put those trips together, we designed those trips together, and he comes out on those trips. And I should tell you, as excited as I am about what you're going to see tonight, when we do these trips, we're together for an entire weekend, and Howard still doesn't make it through all of his content. So good luck tonight getting through this. This is going to be a small sliver of what happens on these airplane camp trips. And I'm really happy to be here, happy to be a part of Truckee's safety program. I think it's one of the best programs in the country. This airport truly cares about safety. And all of you also for showing up here tonight, everybody that's watching this on Zoom. They've gone so far as to offer anybody who wants to sign up for one of our airplane camp trips who's here in the room or watching on Zoom, they will donate $600 to the tuition. So you will get $600 off of a course paid for by the Truckee Airport, which is pretty amazing. Thank you, David, for that. You know, one of the things I think that happens, I mean, I don't know how many hours I've been flying, to be totally honest. It's somewhere north of 10,000 hours. I started flying in 1997, and I've been doing it professionally, as I said, for over 2 decades. And I'll be completely honest with you, a lot of what Howard and I have been doing and a lot of what I've heard him say over the last 20 years, I heard it, but I didn't really hear it. And October of 2024, we had our first total engine failure and forced landing. So we had 19 airplanes out at Monument Valley. That's one of our trips called the Canyons of the Southwest. And I was hosting the trip, and I got that horrible text as everyone leaves. I'm the last one to leave the trip. And I got that text, hey, there's an aircraft down 20 miles east of Page, Arizona, and I think it's one of ours. Right? And that's all I heard originally, is that one of our aircraft had gone down. Now, these folks had just left an airplane camp trip, so they had just heard all the lectures on survival, everything we teach. Howard is one of a handful of amazing educators that come on those trips, so we learn all of this stuff, but we also learn how to crash an airplane and dissipate energy and all of the stuff you would need to survive this, but still, I'm thinking this could be the worst, right? This is pretty inhospitable terrain. Ultimately, we got both pilots rescued inside of 6 hours, which is a minor miracle. All right, the helicopter pilots, when they got them off the butte, I remember speaking with the helicopter pilot saying, you know, that was amazing. You got these guys off the butte in 6 hours. We teach that it takes, that they're going to be out there for about 24 hours. And without missing a beat, all three of the helicopter crew said, yeah, usually they are, right? So usually, if your aircraft goes down, you're out there for 24 hours, and that is Howard's talk tonight, right? That's the title of the talk, spending the unexpected night out. And often people are not prepared for that. I know that this kind of thing happens a lot here. The most recent one I can think of was a gentleman coming, I think, from Idaho, trying to sneak through Desolation Wilderness in the wintertime, had a crash out there, survived the crash, but nobody ever found him, and he died next to the airplane. Right? So a lot of coming home safely is, well, let's just say there is a lot to coming home safely. Can you hit the play button by any chance? Is that up? For me, that experience, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit, and I can only talk about it a little bit. I would love it if some of you or all of you would join us on an airplane camp trip where we can be together for the weekend with fine food and great educators, and we can really unpack this education. But for me, it changed the way I fly. And I know, like for 10 years or 15 years or whatever it was, I saw Eric Cope, who's one of our educators, I saw him put on his survival vest every time he got in the aircraft. We go through a survival vest. You all get a survival kit if you come on airplane camp. Was I wearing it before this accident religiously? No, I wasn't. But I just said to Howard, that experience in my life changed the way I fly. When I came up here from Grass Valley today, it's a 25-minute flight. I filed a flight plan, I brought a PLB, and I wore my survival vest. That's not something I probably would have done 15 years ago if I hadn't lived through this. So my hope is to try to convey this experience to you a little bit in a way that inspires you to take the knowledge you probably have, the things you've probably heard, and the stuff that you haven't yet heard, and try to take it seriously, because you never know. You just never know when it might happen. And if it does happen and you're prepared for it, the odds are very good, especially in a light single-engine airplane, that you're going to come home just fine if you plan correctly. So for me, I've distilled what I learned into what I call the 3 rings of survival, sort of 3 levels of preparedness. You could probably go to the next. Oh, can I do it? Okay, good. Look at that. All right. So I sort of see contingency planning and surviving a potential forced landing in 3 preparatory rings. And now this is the hope for this kind of framework, this way of thinking about it, is that it doesn't just apply to the flight that I just took over pretty remote terrain and, you know, pretty inhospitable terrain, but it can also be used to apply to any flight. And some flights don't require a lot. If I'm flying from Oakland to Livermore, I'm not wearing my survival vest. If I'm flying from Oakland to Livermore, I'm probably not filing a flight plan. But that's okay. What you're going to see in this framework is those risks are covered by other means. So just understanding where you are in those 3 rings and understanding what tools you have available to make sure that you've mitigated those risks, it can be a wide range of things, from very, very remote, where you want a PLB, a flight plan, and all those other things, to flight following, which usually suffices in a place like the San Francisco Bay Area. So the first ring is the golden rule that if nobody knows where you are, they can't come save you. Right? And we all know that, well, maybe we don't, but does anyone remember the story of Steve Fawcett? Right? I'm an old timer now, but right? Steve, one of the world's most respected adventurers, took off and did not tell anybody where he was going. Didn't have a flight plan. Didn't have a PLB. It's very difficult to go save somebody when they could have gone in any possible direction. All right? One of the things that I've done over my career is flown a lot with the Civil Air Patrol. Is anybody a Civil Air Patrol pilot here? Right, so you guys do those exercises where you practice search patterns looking for airplanes on the ground. When I did that with Civil Air Patrol, they told me exactly where the airplane was. They said, there's an airplane in the southeast corner of this field. Let us know when you see it. 10 minutes later, I was still looking for that airplane. I knew exactly where it was, and I just couldn't see it. So don't make the assumption that you're out there next to your plane waving your arms, you're going to get seen. Somebody has to know where you are. That's rule number 1 in coming home if you have a forced landing. Now, here in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, there's plenty of places to land. It's not like Idaho. You go to Idaho and you're kind of, you know, taking on a whole different level of risk. You're going to be in the pine trees if you lose your engine. Here in the Sierra Nevadas, you can often just glide to one of those beautiful green meadows with the nice body of water at the end. And if you don't hit a stump, you're probably going to be fine. right? You pick going into the wind, you'll be okay. But if nobody knows where you are, they can't come save you. So what are some tools you can use to mitigate this first ring? And again, I'm going to go really fast over this stuff because I could probably talk for another hour about it. But I'm just going to give you the framework, and we're going to plug Howard in where all of this stuff kind of applies. You can have a flight plan. You can have flight following. You can have, obviously, your ELT in your aircraft. A PLB, a personal locator beacon, and there are different types. Sometimes an iPhone can contribute these days with satellite capability. One of the things that I'll give you an example of a very practical lesson I took away from our experience in Arizona. Messaging on your PLB is critical. Okay, because I got that text that an airplane went down. They had an PLB that allowed messaging. So moments later, I got a message from the pilots who were down saying, our engine failed, we crash landed, but we're both okay. And I could message back, that's amazing, where are you? We're gonna get a rescue coming. So I want you to think about the psychological difference there. You might be out there for 24 hours. Those guys knew instantly that we were gonna come find them, instantly. So all they had to do then was make themselves comfortable and know that rescue's on the way, versus you break out your old PLB, you break the glass, you hit the button, and you kind of wonder hour after hour after hour. And then the sun sets, and then you're cold, and then you're out of water, and you're waiting and wondering, did it go out? I'm not really sure. So if anybody's sitting there going, well, I don't want to pay $14.95 a month for that, messaging service, let it go. It's worth it. It is 100% worth it. And that is a lesson I got out of that particular incident. Okay, the second ring, even though we knew where they were, 22 miles east of Page on a particular radial, it was still difficult to find them. As the Civil Air Patrol people probably know, I took off in the aircraft and I was trying to find them. I was doing everything from trying to locate them on my phone, just they shared their location with me. That led me astray, by the way. That led me miles out of the way. It was nowhere near them. So I went back to the radial and I'm trying to fly. I'm 22 miles out. I don't see the aircraft. Then I got a call on guard. They said, we hear you, but you're too far east. Come west, you're too far east. They had a transceiver, right? They could communicate with me. As I got close to the crash site, boom, they hit me with a signal mirror and we had them. They had a signaling device. So just because you know approximately where they are doesn't mean they know right where you are, right? So this is the sort of second ring, and Howard is going to get into some of this stuff tonight in way more detail. But signal mirrors, laser flares, transceivers, the radios on your aircraft, smoke signals, right? These are all things that you can use to draw the rescue close to you. I'm going to show you a quick video here from Peter Lert. Peter is a former test pilot. He used to work with Burt Rutan. He's a legend who nobody knows, essentially. He's got every flight instructor rating in the book. He's done 50 North Atlantic crossings. He's had airplane crashes himself. And on our trips, he teaches energy dissipation. This is his quick 2-minute video. I asked him to sort of boil his entire weekend's talk down to 2 minutes. So forgive me and Peter here, but this is it.
Hi, I'm Peter Lert, and I often teach the art and science of successful forced landings for finer points. Over many years, I've made thousands of forced landings, admittedly, all but a few of them in gliders. What I'm going to touch on now is the science of forced landings, in particular, how little room you really need. Trust me on the math, but if you can arrange to land in brush or shrubs, in crops, or even just in tall grass, you'll decelerate at about 1 G. Touching down at 75 knots, you'll come to a stop in about 4 seconds and cover less than 300 feet. I once had an engine failure in a Marchetti SF-260, a fairly hot little Italian military trainer, and I had to put it down in a rocky pasture. I touched down at about 75 knots and later paced off the ground run at 267 feet. Can you withstand a 1 G deceleration? Easily. Navy pilots touch down at about 140 knots, stop in 300 feet, and withstand about 3 Gs day in and day out. So a little advice. A shorter field with clear approaches and an appropriate surface might be a better bet than a longer one that lacks those. Don't try to touch down in the first foot of the field. Unless it's on a cliff, going off the far end on the ground at 10 or 15 knots is way better than stalling in short. However, once you are within the field, don't try and hold it off for the gentlest possible touchdown. It'll slow up a lot better on the ground than in the air. In the words of Bob Hoover, keep flying it until the piece you're sitting in comes to a stop. And for what it's worth, my background photo here, which is Mount Cook in the Southern Alps of New Zealand, was taken on a flight that ended in a forced landing.
All right. Thank Peter for that. The last ring is once there are boots on the ground actually getting close to you, how do they locate you specifically? If it's a dark, snowy night and they can't hear you anymore yelling help, what mechanism do you have? If they're a quarter of a mile away and you can hear them, but they can't hear you, or you can see the flashlights, but they don't quite know where you are. And that's really what the last little bit of information is there. Rescue streamers, surveyor's tape. That's if you have to leave the crash site. We really can't get into all of this. On our courses, Howard goes into this stuff. And as I mentioned, a whole weekend isn't enough time to really go into the education and go through everything in your survival kit. We do our best. So tonight is really just a quick glance at it. If anybody's interested in actually hearing from the pilots who had the forced landing out there in Arizona, there is a webinar on our website at learnthefinerpoints.com. We have webinars once a month or every other month, and all the archives are there to watch. One of them was those two pilots, the instructor and the student, talking us through what it felt like from their perspective. And tonight, Howard is going to go into spending the unexpected night out, which is a concept that I think I take a lot more seriously now. And I think everybody who's flying, certainly in the Sierra Nevada range or any terrain like it, should take seriously, because there's a lot that goes into pulling a rescue together. When we finally found them, I flew to Page, Arizona. I dropped the lat long on the helicopter pilot's desk, and I said, "Can you go save my friends?" And it still took time. It's a Sunday afternoon. They had to call. There was one helicopter. They have to pull their crew together. Let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and they're making phone calls and they're starting to coordinate your rescue. I started to get messages from Fernando out there on the butte saying, "Are you guys coming?" or "Where is it?" You know, he knew we were coming, but like 4 hours staring at Joe was a long time, right? And fortunately they took home all the beer. So they were sitting on like 3 cases of beer, which was nice. But but it takes time to pull those rescues together, and it may not happen until the next morning. They may not come out that night. It is likely that you will be out there for 24 hours. And in that way, Howard has been instrumental in really in setting the tone for our courses, for this framework for survival, but also for helping me understand what is relevant in a survival kit. I always thought, well, hey, I'll pack food, right? You want some food. Howard was the first person to tell me that's maybe not so important, right? What we want to focus on is the 24 hours and what is truly relevant there. And so instead of just buying your old, survival kit from Sporties with the fishing hooks and the iodine and whatever else they put in there, their little space blanket, I would really pay attention to what Howard's teaching tonight. There is nobody better on earth to talk you through what it truly takes to spend 24 hours out when you weren't expecting to do it. So I hope you guys consider joining us on an airplane camp trip. There are 2 trips left this year, one in late June, one in October. David and the Truckee Airport put their money where their mouth is when it comes to safety, and they'll offer $600 for any course. So we'd love to see you out there with us someday. You don't need a backcountry plane. Just bring the plane you normally fly, and we have a great time. So thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight. I'm going to introduce Howard Donner, who is really a legend in my mind. He's he's a legend in his own mind. But I think you guys know Howard, so thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. You got the mic? You want to clip it on you? I'll set Howard up with this microphone here.
I think it's really odd that people would come to a survival talk given by a Donner. But
Come on. That was a...
all right, you'll hear some of the same jokes if you've come to any of my talks before. All right, tonight is going to be survival, sort of survival tidbits. Can't teach survival in an hour, but we can introduce you to some stuff. And I think every survival talk that I've ever given typically starts with the rules of three. It's not that I want to be particularly pedantic or anything. It's just that I think it's so important to set the tone for priorities. So how do the rules of three work? Rules of three, there are three of them, and then we'll add a few. So first of all, it's about 3 minutes without oxygen. I won't go into details, but you know, in my former life, I was an emergency room doctor, and we could talk a lot about initial assessment and management of trauma after a wreck. But for us tonight, 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours without warmth in a hostile environment. Now, of course, huge variables here. So these are just rough rules. So 3 hours, 3 days roughly without water. I know there are stories about people that went 5 or 6 days, but roughly 3 days without water. And then finally, it's 3 weeks, if you're like most Westerners and you carry around some of this stuff, it's weeks without food. So that's where our priorities are going to be. Teaching survival with some special forces folks over the years, they go, yeah, we add 2 to that typically. And the one thing they add at the beginning is 3 seconds following a bad decision. And I like that one. It's apropos for pilots. In the emergency department, we used to say, don't just do something, stand there. Or the first pulse to take is your own, you know. So 3 seconds following a bad decision. Don't always have it. If you lose an engine on a short field takeoff, you might have to push immediately. But most decisions, you have a few moments to think through before you do something silly. And then the last one, I consider myself a world expert on this because I saw Castaway with Tom Hanks, and that is 3 months without companionship. And human variability is vast, so who knows if it's 3 months, but the bottom line is that humans are essentially social creatures, and without any companionship, at some point, we tend to go a bit whack. All right, a little bit of psychology, and we could spend a lot of time talking about the psychology of survival, but there's a guy named John Leach who teaches the psychology of survival. And I guess the most important thing that I would have to say about what he teaches is that in a typical survival situation, if you take a large group of people in a disaster, what have you, about 80% of those people are going to be essentially in some form of sort of passive limbo. They'll need to be told what to do. They don't necessarily panic. They need to be directed, but they pretty much remain with the program. Often 10%, and these are all rough numbers, of the people in a large group become essentially leaders and will often help, assist, and tell the 80% what they need to be doing. And then I'll call it the bottom 10%, but that's not really fair. 10% or so of people in these disaster situations, according to his research, are the people that lose it. They're the people that panic. They become a liability to the group, and they need to be managed. So, in a long survival course, we could spend a lot of time talking about the psychology of survival. I often teach survival with a woman, and I kind of disagree with her on this. She really goes into detail about positive mental attitude. You know, don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. I don't think our brains are able to process that kind of negative information so well. I think human brains do much better with thinking about what needs to be done. And I know you've all heard this, but this old adage that you sort of typically don't rise to the occasion, but rather you fall to your highest level of training. And I think that's really critical, that you need to practice this stuff. So I always worry when somebody shows up with a survival kit from REI or from Sporties, and I'll say, what's in your kit? That looks kind of cool. And they'll go, I don't know. I've never used it. I don't know what's in it. You got to practice this stuff, and that's really important. All right, and I think anything that you can do to target what needs to be done, that should be your strategy. What needs to be done? Tell these people that don't know what to do, why don't you start building a shelter? You can take the shovel and start digging a hole or whatever it is, rather than telling them not to panic, because I don't know what to do with don't panic. Anyway, we've got a short time. On YouTube when you want to turn up the speed a little bit. I don't know if y'all do that. I can't watch a YouTube without turning it up to 1.5. So I'm gonna turn myself up to about 1.75 or so. And so we can get through some of this stuff. It's just gonna be an intro. So the first thing I'll talk about is in terms of the important thing, 3 hours in a hostile environment, the first kind of shelter I always think about is your personal shelter. So most of you know how to dress. There may be somebody sitting in this room right now, possibly in the front row, possibly to my left, who I saw flying in flip-flops. So not a good idea crossing the Sierras in flip-flops. So stuff you might want to bring, we'll talk about some dedicated survival stuff in a second, but personal shelter, just have stuff in the plane. So in your pack, have some kind of puffy jacket if you can, have some sort of weatherproof, windproof, waterproof jacket or whatever. This should be in your survival kit. I worked for many years as a rescue doctor up on Denali. People would always say, oh man, you must have been so cold. And I would always say, freezing or frying. So it's really important not just to stay warm, but to stay dry. So, good gear typically is going to have pit zips, and you're going to need to be able to regulate your temperature. We don't have time tonight to go into layering and how to stay warm, but a good jacket and a good windproof, waterproof, typically jacket like this or something bigger or better, good thing to have in the back of your plane. All right. I like to have some kind of gloves. I don't like wearing gloves. I feel like in the modern world, my hands get soft because I'm not using them enough. So I don't like wearing gloves. But in a survival situation, really important to have something to protect your hands if you're gathering wood, if you're building shelters, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a good idea. All sorts of dedicated kinds of things. These are just waterproof, windproof pants and parka, however you want to do it. There are a million ways to do this. I always want to have something to cover my head. Somewhere, this is what I actually carry in my flight bag. So I have all of this stuff in miniature. So I have a little balaclava, I have a little neck gaiter in here, I have a little beanie cap, I have some really lightweight gloves. So I don't carry all this big stuff. In fact, somebody walked in, I think it might have been Riley, who said, you carry all this stuff in the plane? So I'm just showing you stuff. I don't carry it all. So this is what I might carry on a given day. Balaclavas are good because they cover your head and your neck. And I know somewhere you probably learned in your survival training, somewhere you can lose 50% of your heat through your head and neck. Have you all heard this? So a guy named Gordon Giesbrecht, long story. I like talking about hypothermia, don't have time tonight, but he's done a lot of research and he was able to determine that the amount of heat you lose through your head and neck, wait for it, is proportional to the surface area of your head and neck. So that old 50% thing is probably not true. But the problem is people have misinterpreted that and they go, oh yeah, head and neck's not important. That's been disproven. The problem is your head and neck is still important because you might be wearing your Michelin Tire Man down suit and your head and your neck are still naked. So it's really important to still cover your head and your neck, but you don't lose half your heat through your head and neck. All right. I don't have, well, I'm not going to keep saying I don't have time, but in a longer course, we teach shelter making. I went to 10 essential lists on Google, just randomly, because it's the 10 essentials. That's what you need to bring, the 10 essentials. And in none of the first 10 I looked at was there a shovel. And personally, I used to live in Telluride, used to fly out of Telluride. In the winter, flying out of Telluride, if I could put one thing in my survival kit, probably be a shovel, because I know with a shovel, I can dig in. I can dig a snow cave, I can make a pit shelter, a trench, a quincy, all sorts of stuff you might build in the winter, and I can make a shelter out of this. I'd much rather have a shovel than a bunch of stuff to make a fire, personally. But anyway, I don't believe in the 10 essentials. I just believe you have to have good stuff, and it's going to be somewhat dependent on where you are and the time of year. Are you flying over snow? Are you flying over the desert? Et cetera, et cetera. All right. One of the things that you need to do going away from personal shelters, we're kind of advancing into actual shelters, and that is something really quickly to get out of the wind and the rain. I know I've read get out of your airplane because it turns into an ice box. I've read this many times. And airplanes, oh, no.
I apologize, everybody. I have to return to students in Grass Valley. I feel rude for leaving, but I don't fly without my survival vest now.
He says it's a survival, it's actually a parachute. Does anyone remember what I was talking about? I have no idea. Oh yeah, that you're, people think I'm getting senile, but I've been like this since I was 20, so don't worry. So planes don't turn into ice boxes. The bottom line is there's no insulation. They won't keep you warm. Nothing wrong with getting into your fuselage if it hasn't burned up to stay out of the wind and rain, but you still have to figure out how to stay warm inside. But as far as a very quick personal shelter, if you're too cheap, and I'm cheap, to buy a fancy bivy sack is just a good contractor grade orange garbage bag, works really well. And that looks like this, and it rolls up into almost nothing. And I carry this in my survival kit or a fancier bivy sack, but cheap, has to be big and contractor grade. Probably Scott knows how many mils that is, I don't know, but and you can turn it into a shelter. Is DVQ in here? Can I use you? Do you mind if I humiliate you? Okay. So the typical laboratory for determining how to use garbage bags for shelters is football games. And 93% of people, I made that up, but they cut a hole in the top and they put their head through it. That's how you do it. But for survival, probably better to put the hole here and never put a plastic bag over your head. Something like this. There you go.
All right.
And this thing is not going to breathe. He's going to be. There's going to be humidity inside of it, you know. But it's the lesser of evils. Better to be out of the wind, convective heat loss, wind chill, all of this, and spend a miserable night hunkered down in this thing than to have nothing. So at very least, something like a bivy sack or a garbage bag.
Actually kind of warm now.
Yeah, way too cold. They make fancier things. Do you mind a slightly higher level of humiliation?
Sure.
Okay. So
you don't still need this projector for anything, do you?
No.
I'm gonna turn this off.
This is called the Blizzard. They make a lot of things like this. I have one that hasn't been pulled out. I'm not sure where it is. But this is a dedicated one-time use survival jacket. And these things are really warm because this reflex cell that they're made out of keeps you super warm. And you probably feel a lot of heat in that thing.
Oh, yeah.
We've played with these things in super cold weather, including in Alaska, and it's not on right. He would button up that thing. But they make a lot of survival systems like this, and this will fit into a little vacuum-packed brick that goes in the back of your airplane.
Yeah, it's actually quite fashionable too, huh, Howard?
It's a good look for you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Cool.
A new company, and I've not used these, that's just coming around in the last few months.
You still need me?
No.
Okay.
Thanks. Is this company Igloo Survival? I don't know much about these other than the company claims that these are even better than Reflex Cell. And at some point, probably on one of our courses, we'll play with these in the cold. But it basically, unlike the typical space blanket, it actually has closed air spaces. In other words, it has little baffles in it, which work to insulate beyond what a space blanket does. The problem with space blankets, when we teach courses, a lot of the pilots we teach will go, what do you have for shelter? And they'll go, yeah, I'm cool. And we'll go, what's in your survival kit? And they'll go, yeah, I got this. It's my survival kit. So let's look at these and see how well they work. It's kind of funny, with all due respect to DVQ, that the advertisement for this course shows me wearing one of these, and I was thinking, no, because I talk about how, I was going to use the S word, how bad these are for survival. So, so first of all, this is what they look like. And if this is all you've got, so you're sitting by a tree in the wind, and this is the picture that advertises this course. I don't like emergency space blankets as a dedicated survival item. They also make a lot of noise. If this is on your head, you can't hear much. If you happen to be sitting by a shrubbery, they sort of tear into shards. They're not the ideal survival item. Does that mean they're worthless? Not at all. Space blankets work really well in space, where your primary heat loss is radiative. And these do reflect quite a bit of your radiative heat back to you. So in conjunction, say, with a garbage bag, wrapping yourself in this thing, then getting in a garbage bag, then stuffing in pine boughs or anything to create insulation, stuff out of the seats of your airplane, whatever you can find. Back in the olden days, it would be sectionals or newspapers. Just make a sleeping bag inside the garbage bag and start with a space blanket. These things are great. They do keep you warmer because they reduce radiative heat loss, but they don't do much for conduction or evaporative heat loss or convective heat loss, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Yeah, they do. They are flame. Good. Who won the air bases tonight? Good. So we're going to demo one of these. This has been, in my mind, the biggest change. Where is it? Under? Yeah, but I have one that I want to blow up. Oh, here it is. So the problem is, for many years I used to do a lot of rescue and been on many rescue teams. And you could find victims very easily because there'd be, a 7-foot pile of down vests over the victim. And you pull all this stuff off and there's the victim shivering on the snow. You have to, as most of you know, insulate from the ground up. So you can bring, foam pads and stuff, and often survival kits include things like this. I've got some other foam pads around here somewhere. By the way, this is what that survival jacket looks like before you pull it out of this while it's vacuum packed. But the problem is that wouldn't it be nice if you could just carry something really small just in your survival kit or survival vest that would get you off the ground in a survival situation? So these were just invented within the last 2 years, and I love these things. My biggest problem was, how much breath are you going to have to blow this thing up? Well, the company, the guy that sells these, said it's like 5 or 6 breaths, and I'm going, there's no way. But it really is. Then I thought, well, if you pop a tube, then the whole thing deflates. And that's not really very reliable for survival. But each tube has an independent chamber, so if any of these rupture, the rest of the thing does not collapse. And then I thought, what about heat? You're in the desert. Big problem in the desert, as you probably know, is the surface of the desert is super hot, so it would be great to be able to get off a hot desert after you build a shade structure. These apparently do not melt in up to something like 160 degrees. So this is what they look like. That was 3. There's a few valves that are sticky. If we had another hour, I could finish this. There we go. So, what if you pop it? Doesn't do anything. Each valve is independent. So, this is an air base. I think they're really cool. They've only been out for a short bit. But you should probably have one of these in your plane. Do you like it, DVQ? Do you like that thing? Yeah? Let's go from 1 to 10. 7. Okay. I was going to mention, I don't know how many of you know John Jewett. He's in the room. He's a pilot. He wanted to save money on getting an orange contractor bag. So I told him, but I was only joking, that if you just commit a misdemeanor instead of a felony, you'll get free orange bags from the highway department. And apparently he did it. Did it work out for you? Good. One thing is that it's orange. It's International Rescue Orange. Orange, International Rescue Orange. Orange must be good. Well, Denise, my partner who's in the back of the room, when I met her, she lived in Vermont. Imagine Vermont in the fall. Look at this. Orange stuff. Picture, we do this canyon strip. Picture Moab or Arches with orange tarps. So this is just a blue contractor grade garbage bag. I've got a friend that taught for many years at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, survival, and he just started looking out the window of airplanes and realized that in red fall foliage or red rock, for example, the thing that really pops is blue, like blue tarps over wood piles or blue swimming pools. So, you know, the point being is, I don't know what color you should get, but orange might not be the right color depending on where you're flying. Okay. This is the bivy sack I actually carry in my survival kit. They're not that expensive. They have advantages over space blankets in that they're rubberized. And so the mylar doesn't tear, and it's turned into a bivy sack. So you're not just flapping in the breeze, you can get into it, et cetera, et cetera. All right, moving on. Communication. We're not going to talk about PLBs. Jason used the word PLB, and broadly speaking, I guess they are PLBs. I usually think of a PLB as a personal locator beacon that works off the SARSAT system, meaning you activate it and the signal goes out. It's not a subscription. It's an international search and rescue coordination that happens without a subscription as long as you register these things. What Jason's talking about that many pilots carry now are some kind of rescue communication, satellite communication device, like a Garmin InReach and about 7 others. And those allow duplex or two-way communication. We did a Fly Safe seminar a year ago here, and that's all we talked about. But for now, some kind of communication device. I would call a headlamp a communication device. So light at night, not bad. This is just a little emergency Petzl headlamp. It's very bright. Jason talked about surveyor's tape, something so that people can see where you are. Something that I carry now in my flight bag. We had flickers on our house and they were pecking the house, so I got bird tape, and I realized in sunshine, this Mylar bird tape is amazingly sparkly. So I don't know anybody that's recommending this, but this is what I bring now, along with orange or pink surveyor's tape. And you don't get a little ribbon of surveyor's tape and put it in the snow. I like to say, decorate your camp. You, like, remember in high school when you TP people you didn't like? So TP your plane with orange surveyor's tape, et cetera, et cetera. Signal mirror, these really, really work. And you should learn how to use these. And we can't tonight. But they're harder to use than you think, even though they're not hard to use. But you need to have practiced with them. This is a dedicated signal mirror that has a sight on it. But any mirror will work if you use the right technique. I went to YouTube to see what people are talking about, and it was unbelievable how much bad technique there was. There are probably 10 YouTubes where people are going, all right, I'm going to show you how to use a signal mirror here. All you got to do is put your hand out like this, and you get the signal mirror here, and you reflect the sun like that on your fingers, and then aim it at the plane. Is there a problem with this? Can you see how much parallax there would be if the mirror's down here? So I'm not teaching how to use it right now, but it just has to be up at your eye or it won't work. On and on. Okay. Now this is for Larry, because Larry said do not use a laser flare, laser signal device. You can't shine it at an airplane. These are actually certified for use in emergencies, and this is the most, I would say, anticlimactic part of this talk, because when we bring these on these trips, people go, oh man, you have one of those new laser signals, are you going to demo it? And I'll go, yeah. And they'll go, oh good, here's the demo. Are you ready? So that's the demo. So that's what it looks like. The thing is though, as you start getting further away, that turns into a swath of light. And by the time you get to about 500 to 1,000 feet, that it's getting wider and wider and wider. But that's going to be a 5-foot swath of laser, and then ultimately a 300 or 400 foot swath of laser light. And it does not blind the pilot. You just get a pop of laser light. And these have been studied extensively. And there's now a clause somewhere in the federal aviation regulations that allows the use of a laser signal. Has to be an actual laser signal, not a laser pointer, against pilots. And because it's a swath of light, it attenuates the amplitude of that laser light and will not injure the retina of the pilot. Are you okay with it?
Thank you.
Good.
Hey, Howard,
Yeah.
pointed out to me that you shine that on that hologram reflecting.
Yeah.
It exponentiates from a flashlight.
Dennis's point, so I've got friends that do rescue in Alaska with the Coast Guard there. They're using laser signal devices now to scan for retroreflective tape. So if you've got a life jacket, say, or any equipment with retroreflection or retroreflective stickers, it's crazy how bright this is. I've got a retroreflective thing somewhere. Maybe it's not here. By the way, I hope I don't sound like an infomercial saying on our trips. It's just that I'm frustrated. So on our trips, we demo these things with retroreflection so you can see what that looks like. But it's as bright as looking into the laser, seeing how these reflect, as Dennis said, off of retroreflection. So thank you, Dennis. All right, moving on. Fire. I think fire is important. I'm not a crazy fire guy. By that I mean, I think if I had a choice between digging into the snow and getting out of the weather versus building a fire like in every survival book ever written, I'd much rather get out of the weather than be sitting in a blizzard with a fire if you could light one. The problem is if you've ever tried to start a fire, you'll realize that if you're taking a survival class and it's Sunday afternoon on a calm day, you can do all sorts of things to start fires. And I have friends that teach traditional fire skills with traditional bows and such, and I have tremendous respect for them, and it's amazing. So this is not in any way to disparage those techniques. It's just that, man, you wreck your plane and your hands are frozen and it's starting to rain and you're trying to start a fire with a bow and drill. Forget about it. So what can you do? So you could bring a lighter, not a bad idea. The problem with butane lighters is they work, of course, but the butane often leaks out and that and that and that. So I think you should always have, at very least, some kind of ferrocerium or ferro rod. You can call these flints, but if you call this a flint with a survival expert, they'll go, it's not a flint, it's a ferrocerium rod. It's like, whatever, but that's what these do. So if you take a cotton ball and Vaseline, and you have to pre-do this, although I've flown with Scott, Scott always for some reason has Vaseline with him, I don't know. And you rub the Vaseline into the cotton ball, and I did this ahead of time because I knew I was going to run out of time. It's just, all this is a cotton ball with Vaseline on it. Tal, do you mind holding this? And then, it's not going to do much, but we should have some system for snuffing it. Can you just go like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you turn?
Yeah.
So you get your ferrocerium rod, this, and you go. There we go.
Almost.
This is the little stoichiometric excess. There we go.
There we go. It works.
So you let it go for a sec. A little bit of ooh. All right, thank you. And that'll burn for 5 or 10 minutes. The problem is, and when I'm talking to non-pilots, I do a lot of courses with medical professionals, and I'll say, oh, that was too rich. That wasn't the proper stoichiometric mix, and they'll go, what? So that was, I put too much Vaseline in that. So you have to have just the right ratio of cotton to Vaseline. All right. So the other thing, I do bring these. These are so-called windproof, waterproof, or in this case, storm matches. And you should have these in your kit. The hardest thing, if you've ever tried to start a fire in the wind and the weather, you can't do it. You go, and as soon as you get over to your kindling or to your tinder, it's like, it's gone. You do it again, you do it 48 times, and now you're out of matches, and it's all over. You can go to Walmart and you can get waterproof matches in the hunting department or camping department. And those are basically paraffin dipped matches that are waterproof, which keeps them from getting all manky in your pack. That's better than nothing. But these are so-called storm matches or windproof, waterproof matches. And I did this at an elementary school because they asked me to come talk about survival. And there's all these little kids, and I go, I'm going to show you what this looks like. And I lit it, and the fire alarm went off, and the fire department came, and they were like, dude, what a dork. So we're going to open the door here so I can show you.
It's going to be hard to see, but squint.
Can you hold this?
Yeah.
Okay, give me the water quick. Here's water. It's underwater, still burning after being underwater.
It's like one of those trick birthday candles.
Yep. Ugh.
Good job. Thank you, Howard.
That is Jeff being facetious. Sorry about the only problem with these is it's highly neurotoxic, so don't smell it. All right. As far as knives go, man, you talk to a million people. Now that Jason's gone, I can badmouth him. The knives that we give to our students are way too big, I think. I just think you need a good single tang knife that you could use for a lot of things, including firewood. And if you've got a good, this is actually the one I really carry as opposed to the ones I pretend to carry, but it's a single tang, meaning it's just one piece. And if you had to, you could baton wood with this. It's not perfect, it's not quite big enough. Something maybe bigger would be better. But with a really solid survival knife, if you need to cut kindling, you can split wood just by pounding a knife through wood, dry wood. And you can usually find dry wood at the base of a lot of trees, especially in the Sierras. It's that really dry wood that's about the size around of a beer can. You can really split that up pretty nicely and make a fire. All right, here's some stuff that we'll talk about that is kind of neither here nor there, just miscellaneous stuff. This is water disinfection. I remember hearing Bear Grylls say that you should never drink water in a survival situation that hasn't been disinfected because you could die from, I think he probably called it something like food poisoning. What a bunch of hooey. I mean, the truth is, in the Sierra Nevadas, for example, at worst, you're going to get Giardia. You're going to get some kind of protozoal infection like Giardia. Your symptoms will come on slowly over the next week or two. You will finally get diarrhea and bloating and blame the restaurant you ate at the night before. It won't kill you. So for me, water disinfection is not as important as most other stuff, but they make very small so-called hollow fiber membrane water filters now, like this Sawyer Micro. And if you had room for it, not a bad idea. There's a water disinfection chemical that most people haven't heard of, and it always surprises me. But this is an outdoorsy group because we're in Truckee, and it's called chlorine dioxide. How many people have heard of chlorine dioxide? So maybe 4 or 5. And in 2026, if you're going to use a chemical disinfectant, probably the best, tends to work better for protozoa, has some efficacy for cryptosporidium, and tastes better, and blah, 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 blah. So earplugs are good. They won't stop the wind, but if you have to spend the night out and you're miserable and scared and you've got earplugs, you can pretend that the storm isn't as bad. Insect repellent, bug dope, not a bad idea if you're getting eaten to death depending on where in the world you are. Luckily, the Sierras aren't too bad, but there are places, as you all know, in the world where you can go whack just dealing with the insects. I talked to Raj when she got back from New Zealand, and she became slightly mental dealing with the sand flies on the South Island. Am I lying? No. Being able to communicate is an important thing. So I know this sounds very basic, but paper and pencil. Why? Let's say, I used to have this happen on river trips. I would be guiding and somebody would get injured and I'd be head guide perhaps, believe it or not, they would let me. And I would send out other guides with an injured patient or a sick client. And I would say, okay, this is what we did. This is what I think's going on with the patient. This is the medicine I gave to the patient. Let the emergency department know that when you get back to definitive care. And they'd go, yeah, he had some kind of sick as hell anemia. And they gave him a blue pill, I think, and maybe a red one. So it's nice to be able to write down what's going on. I know you read in a survival book somewhere, man, I really messed up with that match. I'm sorry.
You're going to lose the deposit.
Thanks, Raj. It's funny, my flight instructor, during my primary training, one day he came to teach and he was just white. And he looked like somebody had thrown talcum powder on him. And I said, Dennis, what's going on with you, man? Your eyelashes, his eyebrows, they were all white. And he goes, yeah, I told this guy that I would disperse his father's ashes. And he tried to throw the ashes out of his 182. And it was kind of like this, where he went like this and it all came into the cockpit. And he was just covered with this guy's father. But I digress. So paper and pencil. Also, I read somewhere you should never leave the site of the crash. Never. So I guess we should just stay here. So I'm with Tal. And I think Tal might have a ruptured spleen, but I read that we're not supposed to leave. So let's just let you die while we're sitting here, because it said in a book not to leave. So we might try to get out, but nice to have paper and pencil. We can let people know, have headed to the southeast, down the west fork of the Yuba, blah, blah, blah. And when they finally get to the plane, they go, oh, well, they left and this is where they're heading, so we can go that way. So nice to be able to communicate. Nice to have something to store water in. How do you make water? That's a whole nother talk. One thing I like about shovels is they're metal. So if you can start a fire, you're in the Sierras during the summer, you didn't crash next to a creek or a spring, you can melt snow in a metal shovel and make water. But now how do you store it? Well, if you bring stuff to store it in, could be a Ziploc bag, could be one of these, that's helpful. Stuff to fix things with. This is cable ties. Why do you need cable ties? I don't know, but I have been in a million places where I've thought, if I only had a cable tie, and sure enough, I usually do, and I've used these to fix things. Utility cord, so-called parachute cord, 550 cord, P cord, for making shelters, on and on. You can make splints and litters and all sorts of stuff. This is something I usually have in my survival kit. Hi, my name's Howard, and I'm an addict. I drink a lot of coffee. And so in the emergency department, for example, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're brewing up coffee, you're staying awake. But how do you do that on a rescue? How do you do that in a survival situation? So if you're a coffee addict like me, maybe some caffeine citrate pills, not a bad idea. Jason talked about a whistle. I know people sometimes kind of laugh when you pull out a whistle. They go, yeah, I know, I learned about whistles in the Cub Scouts or whatever. But any of you ski patrollers in the room? You know, people that spend a lot of time doing rescue in the wilderness typically have a whistle somewhere. There are stories, many case studies about people that go head down into a tree pit and you know, they're hypothermic. They hear rescuers calling for them and they're going, here, I'm here. Having a whistle, really, really good idea. Sunscreen, not a bad idea in the Sierras. And let's move quickly to food. We said that food probably isn't as important as anything else. I noticed that for years I would bring really good survival gear, survival food in my pack. And on a typical alpine trip, I used to live in Telluride, typical ski day would start at 5 in the morning. We'd ski, 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 ski. You'd eat your lunch at 11 o'clock. Then you'd eat your snacks at 1. And now it's 2 in the afternoon and you're like, damn, I wish I had more food. And then you remember that you have your Cliff Bar or whatever in your survival kit. And 100% of the time I would eat my survival food before I would come home from any trip. So I started thinking about that and I thought, what could I put in my survival kit that I will never eat? And I ended up bringing dog kibble. And I have not had to eat this yet, but I thought, you know, or you could bring Veggie-Burger mix or something that's just disgusting, but if you needed food, you wouldn't get into it at 3 in the morning. All right, I think what I'm gonna do is, I could go forever, and oh yeah, this is more important than questions for the moment. How do you carry this stuff? You saw Jason's pack. I carry this in a lot of different ways. On our mountain trips, I'll often carry just a radio vest left over from my rescue days, and with a satellite communication device and a knife and a signal mirror and a few things. I don't carry my whole kit. At times on our mountain trips when I'm flying over the spine of the Sierras and there's really no place to set down. Tal's very smug because he has a ballistic parachute in his 182, but just a fishing vest could work. Right now, I don't know if this is going to happen. I'm working with a company to develop a dedicated survival vest for pilots that'll be a two-part system, a very stealthy vest with a secondary component on the back of the seat that will stick to the survival vest. We'll see if it happens. But the bottom line is you have to carry this stuff on you. People say, and I wouldn't disagree, that whatever you carry on you is your survival gear. Whatever you carry in the back of the plane is camping gear. And I would agree with that. So if your plane's ever burning up and you jump out and your beautiful survival kit burns up with your plane, there you are. So at very least, the one thing, I don't always do anything, but the one thing I always do is when I'm flying over weird terrain, if you've got a satellite communication device or a PLB of some sort, it should be in your pocket or in your vest, not in the back of the plane, not in the side console, not in the pocket, but in your pocket. So if you have to jump out of your plane, at very least, as Jason started this whole thing with, they will know where you are. All right, I am going to stop here and open it up to questions. Could be questions about the physiology of survival, cold, heat, altitude, survival gear, signaling, communications, whatever. Yes?
What about a tourniquet?
Tourniquet. So I was praying nobody would ask this. Jason has said to me on our courses, he'll go, "Hey, Howard, we got 6 minutes left before we're going flying. Can you talk about how to treat trauma?" And I'll go, "No." So tourniquets are great. So you should carry a tourniquet. And in fact, there you go. No. So I'm sorry, I have one over here somewhere. I'll find it. I just don't want to waste time while I'm looking for it. But talk about courses. I teach a course. I have one coming up in Santa Fe in 2 weeks, or even less, I don't know. And it is a 5-day wilderness field trauma course. And all we talk about is how to treat trauma patients in the wilderness. The idea with tourniquets is that for massive bleeding, by massive bleeding, I mean bleeding onto the ground, the way to save those lives is with tourniquets. But there's a lot of gear that you should have, medically speaking, besides tourniquets. And the reason, Camila? What is it? Cecilia? The reason Cecilia said that is she's an emergency department nurse. I spent my life as an emergency doctor before my flying career here. And so some kind of a trauma bandage, which is a pressure bandage. And you can rapidly try to stop bleeding with these. And so I'll think of some questions. I've got a few I can hand out here, and we'll ask some probing questions. If you can get them right, you'll get a free trauma dressing. In our courses, and I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit because this is frustrating for me because treating trauma is not just carrying tourniquets. In the battlefield environment, a lot of what we're learning about wilderness medicine right now comes from TCCC, from trauma, combat, casualty care. But in the battlefield environment, a lot of stuff is penetrating injuries from IEDs and things like that. In the wilderness, the most common injuries, yes, I've seen people get impaled on tree branches. I've seen arterial bleeding, but 99% of what you see in the wilderness is blunt trauma, are dislocations, fractures, that kind of stuff that you can't just treat with a tourniquet. The other thing is, oftentimes, if you're going to be out for days and you put a tourniquet on, as you know, it threatens the viability of the limb because you're shutting off circulation to that extremity. So in our courses, we teach people how to pack wounds using gauze and getting deep into the wound, down to the blood vessel, and packing these vessels. And we have bleeding models, and our students get to actually practice active bleeding and packing these wounds until the bleeding stops. And so this is a really long story. But bottom line is, yeah, you should carry a minimum of 2 tourniquets. You should carry a couple compression dressings. You should probably have a SAM splint, which is a malleable aluminum splint. You should probably have a couple 6-inch ACE wraps, and on and on. Yes?
In all the accidents that I've investigated, zip stitches sort of came in handy for a lot of people because they don't cover their face before they hit the glare shield. No.
So zip stitches are some way to close the wound is important. But zip stitches typically are not going to be used for an acute bleed. They're used to close the wound. So zip stitches are nice, and I have some, but that would not be my first line in a trauma. My first line in a trauma would be to get the bleeding to stop, put a big pressure dressing on it, get that person out of there. Wounds can be closed later by emergency doctors and surgeons. There's no harm in leaving a wound open for a period of time. There are complications if you leave a wound open for too long, but all of those can be mitigated in a hospital environment. Your main job is to stop the bleeding initially. All right, yes. So for asking the question, you get a good trauma bandage. And you do too.
Anyway, is that if you're going fly-in fishing, don't put your waders on until you've landed. Because if the plane goes down and you got your waders on.
There are a lot of problems with waders. And the biggest problem with waders is they are flotation. And so if they're flotation, sadly, there are stories about fishermen going downriver and all you see are the waders because their waders have the air and they can't do the sit-up required to get their waders off. So yes, the other thing is that I would sort of reminded to include is, for those of you that fly over water, Tal, for example, is working on his instrument right now. And he's got a 182 with a parachute. Yay! But there are approaches nearby, Half Moon Bay, Monterey, where you have to go way out over the water if you choose to do that approach. And I don't want to digress, but you could choose not to and say, I'm not going to do it, and circle the land coming in the other way or whatever. But assuming you do these approaches, if you lose your engine, you're going into the drink. So for most pilots that fly out over water, Scott, you fly over the water sometimes, what do you do? So you bring life jackets. Good. So Scott puts them on before he gets in the plane, so he's got them on. Should you inflate them before, assuming that they are CO2 or nitrogen-based inflatable PFDs, should you inflate them as soon as you know you're going down? Why not? Yeah, I mean, picture the typical piston. Often those planes go down like this. This is the front end because the engine. And people float up into the tail cone with their life jacket on, and it's really hard to dive down and get out the door. So never inflate your life jacket until you're out of the aircraft. And don't put the waders on for similar but different reasons. Thank you.
Or by the water-activated PFDs.
So I have a PFD. Denise and I do some professional skippering, and my really nice life jacket that I wear sometimes is hydrostatic release. And when I fly in airplanes with that, I remove the hydrostatic release and just put a separate valve in there, which is just a manual release. I never fly with a I forget who asked it. I never fly with a hydrostatic release when I'm in an airplane, ever. Yes. Oh yeah, thank you. So there are lots of different things you can use. This is a thing I used to use for scuba diving, and it just holds trauma scissors. You know, great for getting out of an airplane. Something I hate about Cessnas, I can't believe this, but John and Scott fly a 206, and they forgot to put a door on the right side. And it's really hard to get to the seatbelt. And I always picture, and the seatbelt release is on the door side, which in my mind is insanity. And if the fuselage is ever crumpled, you're not going to be able to get out. So this, you know, trauma scissors. I have a little necklace that's actually in my flight bag right now, so I don't have it here, but I used to fly a lot with this. I think Raj knows that I had this in her plane on my little yoke mount, and it's just a seatbelt cutter. So yeah, you have to be able to get out of the plane in order to survive. So having some kind of a cutter, I think John and Scott wear little cutter necklaces that are like this. So something to get out of your seatbelt if you can't get to the release mechanism.
They actually make another device that has a seatbelt, but it also has a pointy hammer on it so you can breathe through.
Right. Those pointy hammers work well on safety glass. They do not work very well on aircraft plexiglass. The rescue hammers do. You can beat your way out of them. But like I fly the little RV-12 at this airport, and there's a rescue hammer there. I got to tell you, if I ever wreck that thing and I'm upside down and I think it's going to burn, I'm not going to be chipping away with the hammer. I'm going to put my back against one side and kick the, I'm trying to think of an expletive that Jeff will allow. I'm going to kick the canopy out. Anything else you have? Oh no, we have negative 3 minutes. Yes. That's a really, that's why you get paid the big bucks, Scott. Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes.
One other thing that I would mention is the new cell phones that have SOS capability.
Yes.
You know, I've been involved in a rescue out of Little Truck Summit where the sheriff would not scramble rescue because they just had no idea where this individual was. And at night, and there was a storm coming in the next day. They had an iPhone that had SOS, but now the new Androids have it. And they were able to do some, first of all, locate the person, and then find out that they're okay, etc. And then boom, the rescue went through the morning.
So
It's invaluable. So a cell phone and a way to charge it.
yes. So don't get me going on smartphones. Yes, they work. I tend to fly. I do a lot of instrument teaching these days, and I typically have my phone on a yoke mount. And I'm always worried that if I wreck, I'm going to go forward into the yoke and my phone's going to explode. So I don't think of it as a primary rescue device. The battery on my phone these days literally lasts 12 hours. So I agree with you. If you're going to use a phone, you want a backup with it. I gave a talk here a few months ago, and we talked a lot about smartphone technologies. I think it's amazing. And in fact, on this rescue that Jason talked about with Raj's husband, small family here, we were coordinating. Oh, John, amazing. That was the first time I ever used one. We weren't coordinating the primary rescue, but we were coordinating flights and such, and John and I were talking air to air with our smartphones using satellite technology. I was so excited, but I do not think of them as primary rescue devices.
I agree.
Yeah.
This person actually had an injury and battery was dead. So the phone saved me.
Good.
I will.
And Howard, if I could just add one thing, as well. I know it's with Apple, I don't know if it's with Droid. If you're in an airplane crash, you're within cell phone coverage. Every once in a while, the CHP will call us and say, hey, there's either an airplane crash or a hard landing or something in the airport. But we've had a couple times here. In fact, the recent crash on the backside of Palisades as well, when I don't know how the algorithm works, but the crash, the instantaneous, whatever, 17G impact,
Exactly.
etc. And it'll go to CHP as an aircraft accident.
Good point. And the problem with that is, for example, every time Tal lands, that goes off.
Yeah.
And
I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, but a couple things additionally, as long as we're talking about this, it's another talk, but let's just finish up with this. Thing number one is, any old iPhone that you have, I say iPhone because I use Apple, but same for Android, you can have an old phone that's sitting in your drawer. I'm sure everybody in here has an iPhone. You don't need a SIM card. It doesn't need to be activated. You don't need to pay anything for it. If it's powered up, you can dial 911. On any phone without a SIM card, you can dial 911. So that's a good thing. Number two is, you might be in an area where somebody goes, you really don't get AT&T here, you only get Verizon. There's a reciprocal agreement between cell phone companies so that any carrier will transmit 911 if it picks it up. Number 3 or 4, I forget where I am, there's a new device called LifeSeeker. I should talk to Sarah about this because Sarah runs the Tahoe Nordic SAR, and I know Scott's involved with some aerial stuff with them into the future, but there's a device called a LifeSeeker that you can hang under an aircraft, and it's actually a portable cell phone tower. And if somebody has a cell phone, even in an area that's well outside of any cell phone coverage, you fly, it starts pinging the cell phone, and you get returns. And by flying around for a while, the computer algorithm can locate the victim in an area with no cell phone coverage, and that's called a LifeSeeker. That's pretty cool. Low tech is you can use your damn cell phone as a signal mirror. It doesn't work well because it's just glass, it's not a mirror, but on a bright sunny day, you can use your smartphone just like that. Another thing about smartphones, oh God, somebody stop me. Another thing about smartphones is that people will try to call for help, and they'll go, oh, we're out of cell phone coverage, oh man. Oftentimes you can text, and the bandwidth required to transmit a text message is much lower than two-way voice communication. So even if you can't call 911, you can text it. There's a new thing, and now in all of California, every county in California now has next generation 911, which means you can text 911 on your phone even if you can't make a cell phone call. So that's a good thing, yes?
One really important thing about the cell phone is the light on the cell phone at night. The CHP using night vision goggles and CareFlight and so forth can see a cell phone reflective light incredibly at a far distance.
Yes. Did you hear what John did? John, in the back of the room, just became night vision certified. Scott was saying that the light off of a cell phone with NVG.
Yeah, there's stories as far as 20 miles away, with just small Apple Watches, cell phones, stuff like that.
The last thing I'll say, Denise is back here. She's going to say, it's never the last. But in an emergency, every flight instructor in the world will teach, hopefully, fly the plane. So aviate, fly the plane. But if I am in a situation where there's going to be a forced landing, there's a bunch of things I do to communicate. I'd activate my ELT before I go down. I'd certainly squawk 7700. I'd call Mayday. But I'd also have my passenger call 911. Why not? And hopefully, even if it doesn't go through, after you go missing, emergency services will say, yeah, we got a ping from this lat long. So there's no harm in asking your passenger to go ahead and try to call 911 in a forced landing. All right, we are out of time. I don't know where DVQ is, but he's going to start looking agitated. So I'm going to stop. You can get my cell phone, DVQ. You can give anybody my cell phone.
Sure.
And if you have more questions, feel free to call me. I teach actively out of this airport. Would love to meet you in person. Well, I guess this is in person, but you know what I mean. And thank you for being so attentive.
Howard Donner, everybody. Howard Donner. Thank you, sir. Howard, first, I'd like to present you with a glass of water since you've been talking for like an hour and a half.
It's full of matches.
Yeah. This is a gift card to our Red Truck Cafe, Howard. Hope you stay fed.
Thank you.
Super limited edition Fly Safe hat. Howard Donner, thank you very much for coming tonight. I told you I'd give you that hat. That's it for tonight. For those of you who it was your first time here seeing the Fly Safe presentation and you enjoyed it, we hope you tell all your friends, and we see you next month on Wednesday, June 10th. And if you didn't like it, my name is Larry Finney. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Howard.